Okay, this video is going to seem really petty, but I think it builds to somewhere a little less, well, petty. So I recently went and watched Weapons, and soon after thought I could finally spend some time seeing what other people think, and this Google review sat at the very top of search. It's fairly long, there's lots of information in it, and 525 people voted it helpful. Needless to say, I wasn't one of those 525 people. Now, I'd like to quickly clarify that movies tend to be a little easier to pass than, say, a game because the experience is the same on a physical, textual level for everyone watching, barring alternate cuts, extended versions, and censorship, where a 200-hour RPG only really has tens of hours of mandatory story/gameplay to get to the end. Me and you watching the same movie will see the same footage. As the likes of Lake Mungo prove, lots will be missed, but you can have a very similar experience in the same amount of time. As Lake Mungo also proves, people's reflections on that work are often disparate. This review will have been written up after likely a single sitting, and I don't expect them to catch everything, so I'm going to go some way to addressing their points, and this will lead me down a final path, so I hope you'll stick around for it. Naturally, I'll also miss things too, or have different interpretations, so feel free to share yours as well. Just quickly before starting, I'm going to have to be sparse with the footage here as I only have trailers to work off. Sorry about that. So, Gladiator says, I honestly walked out of the theatre feeling super disappointed. I was expecting a good dose of horror and suspense, but instead it was just 2 hours of flashbacks and plot holes. The movie felt like it was trying too hard to be deep or scary, but it missed the mark. The hype surrounding it must have been from people either overpraising the director or just bots, because I can't imagine it's that highly rated for any good reason. Save your money on tickets and snacks and treat yourself to something actually enjoyable instead. The pacing drags, and every time it seems like things are about to get interesting, they hit you with another flashback. The plot felt nonsensical with cheap quote-unquote scary visuals thrown in just to fill the void. Here's a rundown of why it didn't work for me. Now, there are spoilers, and I can't really avoid that, so I'm just going to give them as they pop up. And if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, but I'd recommend going to watch it and hopefully coming back. Number 1 is, what's the deal with her being a clown? And number 2 is, how are they seeing the clown aunt if the whole thing is supposed to be based on voodoo? I'm going to put these two together. Naturally, the spookiness and weirdness of this is intentionally left up to the audience to figure out, but I'll give my interpretation here. First, the clown thing. Well, clowns are intended to entertain children. There's a Pied Piper style analogue there, and as a result, the whole movie sort of feels like a Brothers Grimm tale complete with a witch. As well as this, their bright colours match the performed feminine vitality of Gladys, going from nearly dying at Alex's house's front door to a human being capable of communicating, walking, and acting as a human. The smeared lipstick and wigs are her attempt at emulating what it's like to be a younger woman. The child you see with face paint is Alex, so the tie between her being a clown and Alex being her puppet are made pretty clear here. Then we see her meditating throughout the movie, very clearly out of it, and she has a link to all these children. This perceived plot hole argues how do you see the aunt if it's based on voodoo, and I'd argue it's the other way around. We see her because of it. She's a spectre haunting the town. Number 3, why did she kidnap these kids? The reasoning to make her feel better was never explained. I'll actually build on this when I get to number 11, so I'll skip this one for now. Number 4, why bother with all the flashbacks if they end up going nowhere? I'm a little confused as to what is meant here. It could be talking about the non-linear narrative, but I'd argue this isn't a flashback so much as exploring the same section of the timeline from a different perspective. The movie is awfully fond of dramatic irony, with the scene with Justine getting her hair cut off being arguably the most effective use of it. In case this is mentioned, I believe she wasn't just killed here because the dead body would alert police to this area, and getting Marcus to kill her instead leaves Gladys without the blame. I think this is also why Gladys says she's leaving after the police car shows up. She doesn't know what reports have been left, what the police know, or what happens when Paul doesn't show up to work. I can't think of what other flashbacks this could be referencing, maybe the scenes with Justine in the classroom or similar elements like this, but almost every one of these scenes directly explains something else in the movie. I think these are arguably the least up for interpretation. Number 5, the plot had so many holes, like how did the aunt magically appear in the basement? Why is it the kids confronting her while the parents are just sitting around, and what happens to the black goo on the dad's face? It's never mentioned again. I don't believe she did magically appear in the basement. In the fight scenes and the chases, she actually doesn't pop up in the house at all. I don't think she appeared in the basement, I think she chose to stay down there initially. As far as the kids only attacking her, I think it is explained in the twigs that Alex chose to grab. In the fact that she snapped a twig and only Marcus attacked earlier in the film, we can assume there's a degree of control she has over specific people with specific actions and specific twigs. Alex likely wanted to kill her, grabbed those twigs, and made it happen. I am, however, a little fuzzy on what's being referenced with the black goo here. I know Marcus spat up black goo on his husband, but I don't remember seeing that being related to Alex's dad. Maybe it is, but I can't imagine why wiping it or getting it moved off in a scuffle wouldn't suffice to explain that. Number 6. What's the significance of the bell? Any time when Gladys or Alex uses the twigs to control people, those are people who have already been possessed. Off the top of my head, it's used twice in the movie on screen, once to summon all the children and once to take control of Marcus. Bells have a historical presence in witchcraft too. Ironically, they're often used to ward off or protect from malevolent fae, which makes her usurping of the tool rather biting. The clearest answer I can think of is that the bell is a tool to cement some sort of ritual that takes control of a body, and the twigs are used to issue the commands. Number 7, what's the deal with tree worship? It seemed random. One could draw a cultural link to the spiritualism and worship and how much the witch's spells are cemented in the earth, but more clearly the twigs come from trees, so not only are trees valuable in the ways they normally are societally, but they're also a tool for control. The aesthetic of the witch is one reliant on the earth too, and despite her bad intentions, she does appear to be genuinely a witch. Number 8, if ring cameras are everywhere, how did no one see 17 kids running into the house? From what I remember, there are 2 central ring cameras used to triangulate where these kids go. There could be more, but it seems like in the movie itself, it only draws attention to those 2. This doesn't account for cameras that could be positioned in the wrong spot, or the general unwillingness to help each other out that the town shares. This builds to the next point. Number 9, why even introduce the affair, the dad, or the druggy character? They don't add anything meaningful. All of our characters are flawed and messy, and this is part of what allows Gladys to worm her way in. They don't trust each other and have never really been given a good reason for doing so. The druggy character, as this critique puts it, is a narrative foil to Paul the cop, who is going through Alcoholics Anonymous. There's this pressure around him, and one he eases through self-destructive tendencies like substance abuse, cheating on his partner, and brutalizing James, the drug addict. One of the primary differences given between the two is that one has a safety net and one does not. Given this critique's reference to James the drug addict and the affair, I think the dad in question could be the police chief, Paul's partner's dad. This is part of that pressure I was talking about. Paul is set up to be dealing with quite a lot. Though he's not set up to be part of the direct task force, there's a lot of pressure from outside to find the kids, and pressure internally with his own alcoholism. The dad is a safety net at work, but also a watchful eye, and importantly, his boss. If this comment is instead about the dad searching for the child, I think the movie does an adequate job of explaining his role. He and his wife are in a rocky place since the disappearance. He is looking to let out anger and soon learns pointing at Justine is the wrong call. Number 10, so many characters are written to be unlikable for the sake of it to the point that it just feels forced. I think they're very complicated, and they see the effects of those complications. Archer never emotionally supported his son, and being generally belligerent is a factor that caused his son to bully Alex. Justine acts rashly, but she has also been accused of being responsible for the disappearance of her classroom. Importantly, she is shown to actually care about her students. Marcus and his husband are intelligent, both in their actions but also their emotions, and are shown to be almost nothing but kind and caring, which actually makes their deaths so brutal. They weren't tainted with the same stink of moral greyness that much of the rest of the town is. And Gladys, being a frankly horrible actor and still making her way into their home, feels particularly so because Marcus's husband simply wants to help and will look past the bright red flags in the mass of her orange hair. The weapons in this movie don't appear to be just the children or adults under the control of Gladys, but also the different elements of each character that threaten others. Justine uses Paul's own sobriety against him, Paul uses his authority over James, Archer uses his anger against Justine. As well as this, Alex stepping up and looking after his home can be seen as a direct parallel to parentification, a role where a child is pressured into supporting a family. This is often the effect of abuse, but the movie takes a very specific lens in analysing addiction and self-destruction in all forms. Alex is being abused in weapons through his relationship to Gladys, and the forced secrecy has a pretty obvious parallel to that of children in abusive homes, making the movie talk so candidly about these elements without actually demonstrating the roles and systems in other adults would feel half-measured and insincere. All these negative character traits build to a tapestry of character, making up the ever-growing shadow of abuse. Number 11, what's with the obsession over parasites? It's never really explained. When I got to here in the review, I actually assumed this may have been a joke, but perhaps that's a bit condescending, so I'll give my interpretation. The talk of the tapeworm and the cordyceps is a direct parallel to Gladys. She is a parasite who worked her way into Alex's home and will now do anything she can to keep her iron grasp on it. It's worth noting that when Marcus and his husband watch the documentary on the cordyceps, Gladys is the one who interrupts them. When Alex talks to his parents, they say they haven't seen Gladys in 15 years, yet Gladys says she knew Alex when he was little. As he is not 15 or older, we can deduce that she is lying about this family, and the parents are unable to contest that. This all suggests that she has been scoping out this house for some time, much like what James did, looking for something to steal. I think understanding the parasite part will also illuminate what she does with these kids. Like a tapeworm, she seems to be draining them of their energy, life force, or some other ethereal concept. And this is what makes sense of why the parents didn't come back, but some kids have. We don't know how much she's drained from these people. She can split what she takes more evenly among 17, but also the parents were taken first. This is maybe a little bit of copium, but I also think this implies that the parents could one day start speaking again. Number 12, how did no one suspect the aunt when all the kids vanished and the parents both mysteriously had strokes? Gladys only takes the father into the meeting, I believe, and she doesn't establish when this stroke happened. I think intentionally so, she leaves that up to interpretation. Marcus, the head of the school, recalls meeting the dad but never the mum, and assumes Gladys is the mum at one point, so it's not particularly weird for her not to show up. It also doesn't make sense to assume Gladys is guilty as Alex is in on it. This seems to be the whole reason she doesn't kill him. She uses him as a weapon. On a side note, in the cover of the movie, the children actually look like arrows, which is a pretty obvious parallel there. On this same note, they also look like arrows when they're running, which I think is intentional. Number 13, why was there a giant floating gun? It just seemed out of place. I think this one is intentionally left up to interpretation, and it's also in a dream sequence. I think this critique would be more widely adopted if it was an actual part of what happened in the movie, but the fact that it's in a dream sequence doesn't really mean much, and in horror movies historically there's always kind of weird things in there. We don't know what level of these dreams are figments of the people dreaming's imagination. The gun could be Archer's own guilt, and it makes sense as I believe he was the one who originally mentioned the kids were heat-seeking missiles. I also think it's fine for a fairly trippy sequence to have elements that don't immediately make sense. I think the weaponizing of the children, or even the school terror metaphor, could be a potential explanation. I know the writer of Weapons disagrees with that last part, but he also seems to suggest just writing because the idea came to him, and authorial intent isn't an objective statement of truth behind a movie, especially when they suggest it comes from somewhere more subliminal. I do get not liking this choice, but I also don't think it really needs to make logical sense. It's fine to just get a bit weird with the imagery. Number 14, the kids ran to the same spot. Why was it so difficult to find them when there were footprints and dogs on the trail? Footprints aren't always easy to find, especially when they're tracking over different kinds of ground for large spaces. It was also raining the night this happened, which would make some footprints harder to spot. The last stretch seemed to be largely on pavement, and even them running on grass likely wouldn't have a Scooby-Doo style trail leading to the door. As far as dogs not being able to find them, I think it's important to note that these children left at 2:17 in the morning, went from one direct place to the other in minutes, maybe tens of minutes. The alert didn't seem to be in effect for a while, and the teacher of the class didn't even find out until she arrived. It could have been half a day getting to those dogs, and even then it's a tad harder as they aren't looking for remains, they aren't looking for scraps of clothes, but the police don't know that yet. There's a gulf of information in between them going missing and it being declared a proper state of emergency. Number 15, why was she randomly in the woods with the druggie? It didn't make sense. This scene happened after James ran away from the house Gladys was in and after the parents chased him out. She knew who she was looking for and seemed to possess some ability to get into people's minds. It doesn't seem incredible to think she might want to track him or get in his head, and by the time he gets around to actually telling the police what he saw, he was already high, paranoid, afraid, and generally quite unstable. He also couldn't report that he saw her in the woods because that would make his story seem less likely. If her goal was to psych him out, it worked. This is another possible explanation for the gun in Archer's dreams. It could be Gladys attempting to frighten him. It could also be her attempting to manipulate him. When we consider his ire was pointed at Justine, riling him up, make him not sleep, make him paranoid, make him aggressive, these all contribute to what Gladys wants to happen. Number 16, the heat-seeking missile thing for the kids being weapons just felt cheesy. I mean, if you think that, that's fair enough, though I will point out that's not a movie tagline. It's not something told to you, the audience. It's said to someone by Archer, a fairly stony man who had a gun above his house in a dream and refuses to tell his son he loves him. This kind of man using weapon terminology for the actions of these children doesn't feel particularly out of character. Number 17, the humor was forced and corny, cursing and shock humor weren't funny and actually undercut any chance the movie had at being genuinely scary. Again, I think this is fair enough. I disagree and think the darkly funny humor hit the right tone throughout the movie. The tension of the last 20 minutes, crescendoing to the bloody ripping apart of the witch, is once again very classic fairy tale, in a way I really appreciate. I don't think it's corny, forced, and I don't think it's shock humor either. I don't think the intent is to make you gasp, and I don't think it's intended to gross you out. Instead, I think it's a needed relief and a pretty wonderfully horrible comeuppance. The purging of a parasite is brutal, and the movie sees it as such. Number 18, the narrator was just dull, especially at the end. Instead of showing us what happened to the characters, he just told us, skipping over some key ones. I would argue this is because we don't know and shouldn't know. It's left ambiguous how much these people can recover, and I think not neatly wrapping every element is what I like. I think it's implied through the last line saying some even started to speak that our narrator could be one of the children, and if so, I think that's quite a sweet note for the movie to end on. I also think telling you what happened is fine, especially when words can mean different things to different people. Showing, not telling, can be effective in horror, but telling and not showing allows your mind to invent the rest, and that can be just as scary. 19, the trailer gives off a completely different vibe from the movie itself. I somewhat disagree with this, though I think it's fine. I'm okay with the trailer being different. I don't think you could fairly call weapons false advertising or anything, and ultimately there's only so much you can actually give away in a trailer. Trailers are its own art form, and it seems like a pretty hard one. Number 20, the pacing was painfully slow. You'd think things were finally progressing, but then you get thrown into another flashback, making the whole movie feel repetitive. Now, I am sort of assuming that by flashbacks they mean actual flashbacks and then the different stories told from different perspectives, because I don't think there was actually that many strict flashbacks in the movie. With that, I actually think the flashbacks often worked well to raise stakes and make the movie more tense. It gives you that information, plops you back in a scenario you're familiar with, but now armed with more information. Pacing is a tough one to critique, and I don't really have much more to say on this. Though I disagree, I think it's fine to not like the pacing. The mention of repetitive specifically makes me think the writer could be thinking about the non-linear narrative, and I guess in that case it seems like maybe they just don't like the structure. Anyway, with that last bit out of the way, I'd like to say I don't usually do this kind of thing, as I think critiquing critiques can be petty unless the goal is to be constructive. However, I do have something to note that I'd like to talk about, and it's not the idea of not liking weapons. Ultimately, your opinion is yours, and hating it or just thinking it's okay is totally fine. I think my central problem with this argumentation is its focus on plot holes. One, I think they often apply the veneer of objectivity to very subjective claims, but also, I think it ignores the art of filmmaking in the first place. There is likely a version of this movie that has every single one of these plot holes and the reader finds excellent, and there's another version that has sealed up every single hole and just isn't very evocative or interesting. The cinema sins approach to whether or not art affected you feels like an Ouroboros teaching future creatives the wrong approach to making art. Ultimately, our goal should never be to make the most logically cohesive and argumentally sound content, and I use the word content intentionally. This doesn't mean that plot holes, or perceived plot holes in this case, can't contribute to a broader point. They can cement why you think a plot's foundation is careless, or why an attempt at satire shows the creator doesn't understand what they satirize. However, I read this review and I wonder why the foundation for a take on something is based on how consistent it is. I can spend this time going over all these arguments, but ultimately what matters isn't does it make sense, but does it make you feel something, and Weapons made me feel quite a lot. Thank you for watching my video on weapons. I think this is just one of those videos that came out of being, I would say, lightly perturbed, but I actually think it's more like a sense of injustice. Like I think this isn't quite fair. It doesn't feel maybe charitable to what's being watched. And also it felt like there was a conclusion that needed to be met with just a parade of arguments rather than the other way around. I think some people, they sort of think conclusion first, and I definitely got that feeling, but maybe that's me being a bit unfair to it. Either way, did you watch Weapons? What did you think? Have you liked anything else recently? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you have any thoughts on my take, I'd always appreciate the feedback. Other than that, I think if you liked the video, it'd really help if you subscribed. I've been trying to get to 3,500 recently, which I just can't believe. Like, I started this year at, I think, just over 500, maybe about 600, and that took a year, just over, to get to that, and now we're 6 times that almost, which is truly incredible, and I'm really grateful. If you want to add to that number and help cheer me on a little, subscribing would really help me out. Thanks.